don't know how good the quality of this will be, but right. So basically, as far as I know, I'll just have a quick talk about what the frustration I've got, and then you guys have got the knowledge in the background to sort of correct me. And a lot of people, you've seen all the comments and stuff that people have been putting about on social media, I'm sure, in your own conversations. But so from as far as I can tell, as a novice, the RPRA are running out of money. It basically looks like the amount of money coming in is less than the amount of money going out, but that's not a new thing, and that probably should have been picked up. Well, I certainly looked at it, and I think the first time I spoke to you guys was about this time last year, maybe just a bit longer, to ask these very same questions. Where's the future of the sport? Because it looks like there's the hemorrhaging money at the RPRA, and what can be done about it? And then here we are a year later, and it doesn't look like anything actually has been done about it. So you guys wanted to talk about what's happened and the decision-making processes, and just clear a few things up. So I'll hand it over to you two, and we'll have a chat about what we think, and I'll interject occasionally with some questions if I don't understand anything, and what I think people might not understand that are new to the fancy, or just don't get involved in the politics of and the running of the RPRA and pigeon racing in general.
Yeah.
I'll just
John,
go first. Just to give a bit of background. So up until probably this year, I was an RPRA councillor, being an ex-vice president as well. So I think probably the past 10 years that I've been involved in the RPRA. And obviously, as you just said, this is not new to the sport. It's nothing new to the fanciers. This has been going on for as long as I can remember, in the days of Stuart Wardrop, obviously Ian as well. They gave their financial report in their yearly report, just like obviously Chris Sutton has just published in the Home and World. And basically, they've been saying the same things for 10 years, and there's been no real action, because I think maybe the British Home and World has been disguising the fact that obviously the losses have been occurring for such a long time. So I think that now the Home and World is not making money. It's just brought it to the attention more of people on a day-to-day basis. When they see £268,000 loss, the questions are bound to obviously materialise. And I think it's fair to say here that on council, there is some really good people on council, and I don't think that generally it's a council fault. I think it's a system fault, from my opinion. The system just doesn't help us in any way. It's cumbersome. It's so difficult to get any change, and looking at some of the comments on social media, people just think you can click your finger and change it, because a lot of the comments, if I was the general manager, I would do X, Y, Z. I think general managers, CEOs in the past have come forward and realize the system is wrong, and you can't simply just click your fingers and change. So although I do agree with some of the comments on social media about how frustrated people are, the change, I think, from my opinion, is easy, but it's not easy, because if the members want change, they can change. That's how our system is. If they feel so bad about change, all you got to do is get to their club meeting, direct their region delegate to go to the region, and then change. If every region wants change has to happen. It's a democratic vote, so change has to happen. But I just think that the members like to sit back and just say, someone else will do it, someone else will do it. And the past 10 years has shown that someone else isn't going to do it. They can't do it by themselves. So I think that obviously it's wrong, I think, to direct all the criticism at council, because it's not their fault. They are tied by a system that's outdated. I don't know what you feel like.
Yeah, I think generally I feel the same as you, although I'm a bit more critical really of not per se council, but the structure in terms of the regions. I mean, I think we have to accept that the membership haven't been engaging in the regional structure for such a long time that we need to find other avenues to get their opinions on things. And you'll remember, John, one of the first things I did was do a consultation exercise, which allowed members to vote in inverted commas, because the vote didn't count for anything, in terms of where they wanted to see the direction of the association. And it was the results of that, although there's only 1,200 people engaged, I would argue that's probably 1,000 more than are engaged through the regional structure throughout the country. And the results of that consultation exercise were total contrast to what comes out the regions. And that just tells me one thing, that the RPRA, the direction the RPRA goes in, doesn't represent what the members want. And that's something I actually said at my interview. And I was quite critical of the RPRA at the time of my interview and was shocked that I got the job. But if I just take a step back, I think John alluded correctly that the British Omen World, really, and the profits that over the years have been generated at the British Omen World have masked the issues, the financial issues at the RPRA, because they've always, to a certain degree, reported a profit in the consolidated accounts. So the consolidated accounts of the British Omen World and the RPRA combined, they never publish, and that's a council decision, they never publish a breakdown of how both those entities are doing, which are, if they had, it would have been clear to everybody what we knew, that the RPRA for years and years and years has been losing money, and it's only the British Omen World that's kept it afloat. Now, back in 2020, when the pandemic hit, council took what I think was perhaps the most positive decision they've ever taken, and that was to place total autonomy authority in the hands of myself, the then President David Bridges, John as Vice President, Gary Cockshott and Paul Ammons as the other Vice Presidents, to do whatever was necessary to get us through the pandemic. At the forefront of that was trying to get racing, which, as we all know, we were the first competitive sport to get underway. But we took that opportunity, really, as a group. I presented the small group with a report. We were meeting probably every other night on Zoom, John, I think I'm right in saying. Yeah. And we put together a bit of a financial report and a bit of a plan, a business plan, for want of a better description, in terms of addressing the losses at the RPRA. Because we were forecasting and could quite clearly see that it was a matter of time before the British Omen World would no longer mask those losses. So rather than wait for that to happen, we came up with a bit of a plan. I put forward my recommendations. We tweaked it. We had some really good conversations over a few weeks, and we changed some of those recommendations. But the core element of it remained that we needed to move the RPRA to a break-even point and run the British Omen World from a maximizing profits point of view, where those profits would then be reinvested back into the sport, to kind of promote the sport and that kind of thing.
What were some of those recommendations that you'd put to move the RPRA back into profit, or at least breaking even?
Well, I'd already made a couple of propositions through council to kind of take some of the existing services online, and I mean the biggest thing there is the transfers. I mean, you used to have a person sat there every morning typing in transfers. That person was employed to do that. And actually, when you look at it, the cost of the transfers was £2 a sheet. And we were losing money because there was 2 first-class stamps involved in that, then sending out to the vendor and the new owner, and the person's time involved. So it was quite obvious that kind of aspect of it was losing money. And we put out the free online transfer version, which was very successful, very well received by the membership. So that kind of process gave us an opportunity to start looking at staffing structures, because we were freeing up time in terms of what staff had to do. And I think, the staff at HQ, I mean, I think they're very undervalued. That's something I will agree with Chris Sutton on. They're very undervalued and do a lot of work behind the scenes, which people don't see. But coming back to the point, the recommendations were to cut the staffing structure, to make efficiencies. We were looking basically at our largest overheads. Premises we didn't really go into any detail in, because the decision was already made to move from the Red Inn. So we were waiting to see what happened with things there. The other, obviously, staffing at both the British Omen World and the RPRA was our biggest overhead. And then thirdly, governance. And by governance, I mean the council and regional structure, which costs at that point in time the RPRA £80,000 a year to run a governance structure, which does not represent what its members wanted. So our recommendations were to cut staffing by a certain level. I think our target was 75,000, which we achieved very quickly through voluntary redundancies. So that reduced staffing at the British Omen World and the RPRA. There was a commitment to make sure that those efficiencies kept on happening. So there was the workload at the British Omen World in terms of how they do things would change and allow us to make more efficiencies there. But the most controversial one, which perhaps cost a lot of the people in terms of the president and John and the other vice presidents their role on council, in my opinion, and that's just my opinion, was that we highlighted the fact that governance costs so much and something needed to be done about it. There was better ways of doing it. And we were looking at ways of kind of not phasing out the regions, but taking a lot of that responsibility, admin responsibility, in-house at no extra cost. Again, utilising online processes and gradually cutting down that cost of governance from £80,000 down to a negligible amount of a couple of grand. Basically, instead of a council, you have an executive committee, and you wouldn't need as much funding in the regions because they wouldn't have that admin burden really of being able to deliver it. So that the staffing cost savings were delivered and the commitment to keep reviewing that. But the governance, the kind of threat that was perceived to the regions from a governance point of view, obviously that didn't have a cat and else chance of getting through. But that's exactly, in my opinion, I still stick by that. That should happen. You cannot justify spending £80,000 and actually now they've raised the subscriptions to regions. It's more like £100,000. You can't justify spending that on a governance structure that only represents a tiny minority of the members. Even if everybody has the opportunity to go to those regions and put forward their opinion, the fact is they don't, and we shouldn't keep hiding behind that to keep an archaic, outdated system which is not representing its members in place.
So, I mean, I think one of the biggest issues with that, and I sort of followed that from our previous conversations and also just looking at what other people are saying, is there's a divide between not necessarily what people want from pigeon racing, but how things are done, like your governance structure. And I think a lot of it is simply down to some people, most of the people that are in charge, I'm assuming at least, might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, are retired. And so they're probably not, in the governance in these in secretaries and in the regions. They're going to have more time. Is that true? Have they got more time to as in spare time? And the fact that my phone would start ringing. I'm just going to take this off the hook. Bear with.
I'm probably best to answer this one.
Yeah, definitely, John.
Well, what I was getting at is, so I've spoken to I'm the youngest in my club by a long way. And everybody, when the birds are released, the secretary has to ring around everybody and tell them that the birds are released. Now, we can do auctions, futurity bird auctions, with 200 or 300 people on a WhatsApp group, and everybody gets the same message in a few seconds. Things like that, the people that are in charge, I mean, one of the secretaries, shall I say, I won't name him specifically, but he says his phone causes him so much trouble because he wanted to send a message out to everybody, but then it sends a message out to everybody in his group, everybody in his contacts list. His kids don't want to know about when the birds are liberated, neither does his next door neighbor. But it's that technological barrier, I think, for a lot of people that makes them think, well, I don't want to do my meeting on a Zoom because I want to see people in talk face to face. Maybe because they've never done it before, and I know for a fact that I was talking to Charlie recently. He's in his 80s, doesn't race anymore, but he gets all his information from the British Homing World. And if you started sending him information through email, he's out the loop. I think the majority of people, at least from what I've seen going to any of the shows and when I've been racing, is the majority of them are of the older generation that aren't going to have laptops, that aren't going to have Zoom or Teams or whatever installed on their computers. Are they the same people that run these regions, or has everybody in the region got access to this sort of stuff, and are they competent in using this communication? Because I think that lack of communication is part of the reason why people are going, "Well, why are we making a loss?" Because they've not been told, or they've not known potentially.
Yeah, so I'm also region secretary. I'm secretary of our Fed.
Here we are.
I'm secretary of our Fed. I'm secretary of the West Cheshire Federation, secretary of the Amal, basically do the club result sheet. And I think in defense of all secretaries, probably, well, I wouldn't say all, but the majority of secretaries do the job because no one else will be prepared to do it. And that's how come if you've got someone who's willing to do it, ends up with 5 or 6 different jobs because people don't want to do it. And when you could produce 22 race result sheets a year and do 21 brilliant ones, but they'll only ever remember that one that goes wrong. You know, it's the same everywhere, I suppose where you go. So I suppose in a way, COVID sort of brought these type of platforms to the fore, because if we didn't have Teams, Zooms, or whatever, the world probably would have come to a standstill. You know, and I think during Ian's role, he did some investigation into how the age demographics, and obviously how many people got mobile phones, how many people got computers, you know, and I think, or we had some teething problems at council, but I think everyone managed to attend the council meetings via Zoom, you know, and Teams. Obviously, some people didn't know how to turn the cameras off, so we had the wives in the background. But they were getting used to it. So I think over time, you know, I would say most people have got families. Some people may not, but they've got daughters, sons, granddaughters, grandsons, whatever, who can help them with that type of technology. So I don't think it's an excuse, because if that was an excuse, every time a new technology come in, you wouldn't see any of these people even in jobs or whatever, because they wouldn't be able to function. I think it's a case of having to learn what you do. You know, and I think, you know, yeah, I do get it. There is people who don't know how to use the technology, but I think there's people who refuse to use it, and I think that's where the big crux of it comes. Some people refuse to use it. And
I think that's why they're not wanting to. I mean, there's £80,000, £100,000 that you say it costs to run the regions. Where does the majority of that money go? Is it in travel expenses and meetings, or is it elsewhere?
No, well, I see this. This is where I don't get the new increase in the subs come in. Obviously, I'm region secretary. I know how much our region costs to run. You know, we do have a surplus that obviously goes into the bank of the region. You know, but at the end of the day, the RPRA have come out and said there's not enough money to run the RPRA. So we're putting those subs up to potentially £35 or whatever they decide that they're going to do with that. Now, the region has taken £5 of that money, right? So why have they given more money to the regions if they're saying the RPRA hasn't got enough money to function? So surely that money should all go to the RPRA, because that's the reason they've put it up. To me, I don't think it's been thought out enough. It's been a bit of a, yes, it 100% has to go up because the figures don't lie. You know, you can see that for yourself. Has it been a massive knee-jerk reaction? Quite possibly. You know, has there been any thought of how this is going to work? I don't think there has. Or if there has, it hasn't been communicated from the top. I mean, I think they're relying on the regions a massive amount, because it's going to double, in my opinion, my work, because the majority of a region secretary is maybe October to November when you're getting your subscriptions in. Now we've just passed February, and the change of financial sort of year for membership is the 1st of March. So all subs should be paid by the 1st of March. So you've done the majority of your work. Now we're going to have to start chasing £18, £20, whatever it might be now from members. And that's doubling the role. So why come out again and say the RPRA need money, but then put the administration burden on the region secretaries?
So just to clarify, Ian, you were saying that you need to make savings in the regions, but then now the RPRA are pumping more money into the regions. But you're saying the regions have already got enough money. We don't need any more.
Some have, not everyone has obviously got resources.
So where would the savings be made that you're talking about, Ian, in the regions, and how?
Well, I would say most regions have got enough, more than enough. There's probably one or two that probably haven't, the ones with the least members, because obviously they got least income coming in. So what John is touching on there with that £5, that equates to a £2 increase per member that's going into the region. And bearing in mind most of those regions don't need that additional income to fund to kind of to function is baffling, really. But I mean, it's a political decision, isn't it? These councillors are regional reps, so they're going to vote for that because they want to go back to their regions and not have the flack. They say, well, you've got an extra £2 cut type of thing. And I think that's the problem here. They kind of, it's like, I think in one of my annual reviews, I used the analogy, it's like watching the Indian tribes fighting among one another while the Europeans come along and steal all their land. It's that kind of mentality, really. But the question you're asking, Dan, where the savings come in is that the vast majority of that income that goes into regions goes to region secretaries in honorariums or whatever you want to call it. It's not a salary, obviously. It's a kind of expenses payment to the regions, but the largest proportion by a long way goes to region secretaries. So the idea was, in terms of efficiencies, we'll take the big, because I've done a region secretary's job, albeit by a year, only for a year, so I understand what's involved. Perhaps not as much as John, because I haven't done it long enough, but I've done it, so I understand what's involved. And from my point of view, the biggest burden is the kind of collection of subs. Now, if you take that burden in-house without increasing your staffing levels, which in my opinion could have been done quite easily, you're then not increasing your staffing levels and costs at HQ, and you're reducing the burden on the region secretaries. Therefore, you reduce the kind of expenses payment that goes to them, and that drives that efficiency through the process. That was our idea, well, my idea, and it was supported by the group.
So why can't subs just be paid online, like a Shopify store or some sort of e-commerce store where you just log on and type your details in, pay it, and it's done?
I did introduce an online system to pay your subs, probably a few months before I left, and since I've left, it's been removed. And again, this is just my opinion, and I might be being pessimistic, or that's not the right word, but it may be some bad thoughts on my part. But from my point of view, the system was implemented. Was it perfect? No. But like any new system you implement, it's never going to be perfect. You've just got to learn, adapt, and keep improving it. So it's as good as it can be in terms of its service to its members. But they pulled the plug on it and just withdrew it. And from my point of view, the motivation behind that was, again, they saw it as a threat to the regions. Because if you take that responsibility from the regions directly into HQ, why do you need the regions?
Okay, so John, do you agree with that? That it's the majority of the workload is in subs and that financial side?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, I am a region secretary, so I'd probably have a vested interest, but I would quite happily give up the role of region secretary if it was taken in-house, because I think historically the RPRA have always issued membership cards.
Why?
Yeah,
I've got one here, and I put it in the drawer. I was thinking about this earlier. I've got and I've never been asked for it, and somebody's got to print that and stick it in an envelope and deliver it to me.
Now that's my biggest time is doing that. Is basically you get your money in. So I get let's say for instance 10 members, I get them, I tick them off on the database of the RPRA, print out the label that you've got on your cards. Put them labels onto cards, send them to the secretaries. Now, historically, you used to need that card to buy your rings. So you produce your card to say, I'm fully paid up member for this year, here's my card. Now it's on computer. The staff only have to look to see whether that person has paid their 2023 fee, 2024 fee. And if it's paid, then they issue the rings. That's the easy part. I don't get it, but it's like the old thing. It's in the rules. So because it's in the rules, you have to do it. And in order to change that, you've then got to put a rule through your club, to your region, to go to council. And then in the end, it's only the people who will attend those region meetings that vote on it. Like we did try and introduce one member, one vote at one point. It was introduced at one meeting and it was going to go ahead, and then the next meeting it was scrapped. And to me, in this day and age, all organizations now they give you an avenue to vote online, postal, whatever. We could do that, and during COVID we showed the way that it could be done, and it was quite how can I put it, it was quick, it was easy, it was efficient. We could do it. But obviously, when Ian left his role, and then obviously we have another change, and this is at no way a dig at any individual, whatever. It's just a change in whatever the organisation you would be. Different people have different ideas. So it's like football management. When you lose your manager and a new manager comes in, they've got their own ways of doing things, and and sometimes it's for the better, sometimes it's for the worst. And we introduced like the transfers and the stray reports. You know, why we have to have someone on a telephone for stray reports in this day and age is beyond me. And I was always in favour of just scrapping it all together. But people were saying, oh, what about little old Billy down the road who doesn't have access to the internet? But he will know somebody who hasn't. Banks, you can't get in touch with a bank anymore unless you're prepared to sit there 45 minutes while all the messages run through. So, and people adapt, people adjust to it. And to me, I would remove that fully. If it was my decision, I would remove it fully because you don't need it. The people that report pigeons nowadays in this day and age is one, either the person wants to keep the pigeon that has got into his loft, or it's a non-fancier. I would say probably and Ian will be able to back this up, probably non-fanciers obviously report more pigeons than anyone else. But as long as you can direct them, which we've got text messages and we've got online, why do we need a phone? Why do we need a member of staff to sit on the phone?
Most people these days would probably prefer to just send a message and not have to speak to anybody. I think that's if they can just get the details through. I think everybody, the general consensus, like you said, Ian, when you did your poll of what people want and then what actually happens through the regions isn't necessarily representative of the fancy at large. And these issues with the communication and with the one member, one vote and doing things online, and I can see some people are just not going to be for that. Maybe selfishly thinking, well, I'm only going to be racing for a few more years, so I don't care after that point, and not thinking ahead. So maybe that might be pessimistic of me, but I think you've almost got this. So if I was looking into the future, into a crystal ball, like we did a year ago, this situation was already obvious. And while I remember, why has this been brought through as emergency legislation when it was quite clear to somebody like me a year ago that things were going to have to change? It doesn't take a year to get to grips with the financial situation. You don't have to wait for those end of year accounts. You should have management accounts at least that give you a rough idea of what's going on, what the situation is. And then you could then propose it again and give people the chance to sort of suggest or debate what the course of action was going to be. Is it because they knew that it'd get voted down? And so that's a pessimistic view maybe, but if you invoke it 142 too late, you've got to do it. There's no argument there. And that might be critical of me, but that seems like or is it just purely by chance? Oh, look, there's this 142 rule that we can use. Thank God that's there, and convenient and time. I think for me, it sort of suggests that if it was my company, the RPRA, and I'd taken the role, and again, I'm not criticising the current members or the current people in charge, but I'd want to know the financial situation straight away. And to be honest, I'd already know it because I've looked at the reports previously, and I've been a fancier for 2.5 years, and I already know the situation. So I'd be looking at these things and voicing them. My concern is the CAO report that's come in the latest British homing world is the first inclination of any of these issues. Out of every episode, how many is these? 52 of these that go out a year, and this is the first one I've seen that's saying we've got an emergency, we need to do something about it. And I feel like that probably should have been done way earlier, and at least maybe even just pave the way to a fee increase and get a better sounding, because now it feels a little bit rushed, and that's why nobody really cares that it's 35 quid. The 35 quid's nothing. It's the fact that it's going to be 35 quid this time as a rushed through thing, but the wages aren't even being covered. The salaries aren't even being covered by the amount of money that went in last year. So it just doesn't look like it's going to solve it. We're going to be back here again, potentially in another 12 months with an even bigger increase with fewer members. It just doesn't look like there's a plan. If they said, right, look, this is what we're going to do, or this is what we're going to propose, should I say. We're going to propose we do this, and these are where the savings are going to come from. Now, the fee's going to go up. You guys can vote on whether we do these savings, and then this is what it'll look like in 12 months or 24 months or 3 years. But there isn't any of that. It's literally a very defensive report that says, look, these are all the problems that we've had, and we've got to push this membership fee up. but there's no reason, there's no suggestion that it's not going to happen again next year. It doesn't say that how much it's going to raise. It doesn't say how much they need to raise. It's just full of holes, and it feels rushed. And to someone, I get really frustrated with it, because if I don't get to see accounts that sort of give a good reflection of the business, you can't make a decision on it. You can't make any informed decisions if you don't have the information. And then if you're asking the fancy to make decisions, or at least accept decisions that have been forced on you, you still need to back it up with something. And I know that sounds critical, but where?
No, I think, if I can come in there, Dan, I think I want to take a step back to that kind of business plan, in inverted commas, we put together back in 2020, because the bit I left out in the conversation earlier was that the subs are set in the rules. So the amount you have to pay is actually in the rules. It says you have to pay £10. And that's very limiting from any business point of view, because it's basically limiting what your income is going to be. You've got no flexibility over being able to increase it. So our plan was twofold, really, to drive down the cost, but at the same time, change that rule to say that the annual subscriptions will be set by council annually. So while driving the cost down, you knew to a realistic figure what kind of your income is going to be for the year coming. So in October, not wait till the AGM in February, in the October council meeting, you look at it and say, our expenses are going to be X, our income is likely to be, so therefore, our income from sales of rings and other things is likely to be X. What's the gap? The gap is X amount, divided by the number of members, gives you a very simplistic way of looking at it, but a start of trying to think it from a strategic business point of view of how you're going to make sure you've got enough in there to cover your costs. So coming back to your point about why, and there was a number of proposals. I even put one through my club to the Welsh region to get our rule changed. So it said exactly that. It'll be set annually. Failed. Because in my opinion, again, the regions, this native Indian kind of theory, they don't trust the council to be able to make the right decisions, right? Now, I'm not in agreement with that. At the end of the day, the council are not going to put the subscriptions up to something. Well, I'm saying this, and this is exactly what they've done. They wouldn't be putting it up if it was a proper planned approach, anything beyond what it's got to be, because they've got to answer to it at the end of the day. So but coming back to your point that why have they used the emergency rule? I think you hit the nail on the head, really. They've done it because they knew if it was done as a proper proposal to the regions, it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have got, it's not a cat and mouse chance it would have been voted through. Now, while we're on the subject of the £35, I think, now again, these are just figures from my own knowledge, looking at the consolidated accounts. You look at the consolidated accounts, the liquidity of the RPRA is still very good because the current the current liabilities as a proportion of the current assets is around about 1.8 as a ratio, which from a business point of view, anything over 1.2 is very good. Now, having said that, obviously, if they lose £300,000 next year, which they probably would, that ratio is going to come down to about 1.2, which from a business point of view is still very accepting, because you can still prove you can pay your short-term liabilities very quickly. You have enough cash, liquid assets there to be able to do it. The problem would come another 6 months later, wouldn't it? Where you're then into a negative ratio, where your current liabilities are more than your current assets. So I can see why they've brought it in, but from my point of view, they use £35, £5 to the regions. That's not needed. There was no need to increase the contribution to the regions. Secondly, a proportion of that would be to cover the loss at the British Home and World, which is, I'm told, circa £100,000. When most members or many members don't subscribe to the British Home and World, that's not right. They shouldn't be subsidising the British Home and World. The British Home and World should be wiping its own feet and even making a profit. So personally, I would be giving the British Home and World 6 months to turn itself around with a proper financial plan in place. And if it doesn't, I'm sorry, it has to go. So, this £35, it just seems like a knee-jerk reaction. That figure's been chucked out there. And they've all voted on it. And I don't blame the councillors for voting on it, because there's also this question about if the RPRA does get into negative liquid state, who's liable for that debt? Now, there's case law out there that suggests it'd be the councillors, because the RPRA is an unincorporated organisation. It's not a legal entity. So therefore, the RPRA doesn't exist. And in that case, it either falls back to the members or the directors. And my opinion is it would be the directors. So if I was a councillor and I perhaps had that knowledge there, and I could see where this was going, I'd have to question how I'd be voting.
Yeah, I mean, why is it a knee-jerk reaction? This is I think the biggest issue is why is it a knee-jerk reaction? Why isn't there a plan? And ultimately, that comes down to a competency issue. If you can't put a plan to people, and this is an issue I've got with the communication, is the information's been there. Yes, it might be a little bit some here, some there, but you can get a general picture of the way that things are. Why would this plan not have been brought forward sooner or proposed sooner? And if we kind of saying one thing and an opposing thing, aren't we? We're saying, well,
yeah,
at least I am. I'm saying, well, they used 142 because they knew that it would get through, but at the same time, we're saying we knew that they had to vote on it anyway because they could see the writing on the wall. So it was kind of, I don't know whether those two things marry up. They're almost opposing, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
So
they are opposing, but that's the reality and the weakness in the system, isn't it? And that's the whole point. This regional structure doesn't work, and people are blaming the councillors. And I think John made the point earlier. There's some good people around that table. There's some people there run their own businesses around that table. It's not necessarily the issue with council. It's the issue with that layer below it, really. And how that's where the power base really lies, because that ultimately is where the decisions are made.
And what is that structure below? What is that power base below?
That's the regional structure. So basically, the small amount of people, which I would suggest is less than 1% of the RPRA members, that go along to the region meetings time after time after time,
right?
They're the ones actually making the decisions, because they're electing their councillor, their regional rep from among them. Mm-hmm. They're discussing the propositions and the rule changes that are coming down from the RPRA council or the clubs, and they're the ones deciding how their councillor votes.
Right. So are those guys getting the information? So if you've got that 1% that are making those decisions, are they getting the information that we can't see? Like the fact that you've got these accounts that you can't see on the British Home and World have been batched in with the RPRA. If they're not getting that information, then they're obviously not going to make the right decision, are they? Or the right decisions? Does that make sense?
Well, they're not getting it. And John, sorry, I probably jumped in where you wanted to come in there, but they're not. I would say they're not getting it. But again, after we put together our proposals, recommendations, and a bit of a business plan, I wrote to each of the 13 regions, telling them I was prepared to come to every one of their meetings to present the report and explain exactly how it happens. I think there was 4 regions took me up on the offer, 5 regions actually, one of which I didn't go to for various reasons. But one of the regions I went to, I drove on my own time on the weekend up to their meeting in Derbyshire, and I got stuck in traffic due to a road accident. I phoned ahead and told them that I'd be late. By the time I got there, I was half hour late. They'd already voted on the propositions without even hearing the content of the report.
Right.
So that just gives you some kind of idea in terms of their willingness to accept that information as well.
Yeah, and I think obviously I was present at one of these meetings that obviously Ian and I tried, because I was vice president at that time, of trying to put our financial sort of situation across and what needed to be done. And you could see, and I'm not going to say this as a generalization because it wasn't everyone, but there was a small proportion of people at that meeting who weren't even listening to what Ian was saying. They just wanted to attack whether it was Ian personally or whether it was the RPRA in general or it was the establishment, whatever it was. You could see they weren't listening, but as soon as he finished, they were like a pack of dogs. They just went for it, probably myself, but more so Ian, in the fact that what we were saying was right. And I think one of the quotes at this meeting, and I still go back to it by myself, was, we were losing £100,000 at that stage. And I said, if you look at our reserves, what we've got, in 5 years' time, that money is gone. It's gone totally if we don't do anything. And they weren't interested. Ian got accused of spending all the money. Ian got accused of the state we're in, and this is the mentality of some of the people. But the problem is some of those people were the region representatives. So they're voting. So again, it goes back to that protecting your own. And basically they looked at the plan as being a threat. Now, I was a councillor at the time, and I would have happily stood down if it meant we could get that plan forwards. I went there to try and see how we could improve the sport. The most important elements of the RPRA is the members. You know what I mean? Because if it goes wrong, then what happens to all those members who like the sport, the likes of us who still race? Okay, mine not very good, but you still enjoy that sending. You enjoy the whole part of it. So I always go back to those members and think, they need to be represented by people who've got the whole sport at heart, not just their own personal interests. And that's where, in my opinion, it falls down. There's too many people making decisions that affects themselves.
So I think sorry to jump in. I think the issue there is, so I've only been flying a little while, and I'm not really clear as to how these when they occur, the structure of it, how you get to propose something, and what you need. Do you need somebody seconding it? Where it goes from there. Obviously, being a novice, I'm not going to propose anything anyway, because there's loads of stuff I don't know and probably propose the wrong thing. But is it that it comes down to this communication thing again, where there seems, with the RPRA, there's not much. It's a one-way valve. Stuff comes out occasionally, but nothing goes back in, and there's no communication with the members, or there doesn't seem to be a forum where you can communicate with them, and they can generate. I mean, it looks like Chris Sutton and the others in charge, they're being attacked from all sides, and there's nothing that they can do to please everybody. But I think one of the things they're missing, the trick they're missing, is they're not reaching everybody. So it feels like they're being attacked because the only people that are listening are the people at the meetings or on social media, which they've kind of distanced themselves from. So they don't allow comments on their Facebook page because it's going to be trolled. And I can see why they've done that. But at the same time, you've got to open up a way to communicate with people and maybe tell them how easy. I mean, I know how easy it is to make a video and say, look, this is the thing that we think or I think as CEO we need to do to improve the sport. Go along to your meeting, and this is how you go along to your meeting, and this is where it is, and give somebody a couple of days to create it and say, these are where the meetings are. Turn up and vote for this if you think this is what you want to change. And I haven't seen any of that, and there's nothing out there that sort of says to me, Dan, there's a meeting down the road. We're trying to get this for the good of the sport. Please go along and vote for it. And I haven't seen any of that. And that's kind of might be partly my fault for not digging into it a little bit more. But I think a lot has to be. You need to put some resources to make these things, to make these changes, and to convince people. Because, like Ian said, if you've done that already, and you know that most people want these changes and they want the future of the sport to be secure, they'll vote for these things. But I think a lot of people don't know. Like, I don't know what it is I would be voting for. Where is that information, and how do they communicate it to me?
I think maybe this announcement of the increase in subscriptions has maybe woke a lot of people up here, because now it directly affects each and every individual. Whereas in the past, if you go, that doesn't affect me, that doesn't affect me, that doesn't affect me, where obviously all these decisions do. But I think now you're directly affecting every single member. And my personal opinion, I wasn't at the meeting where they put the subs up, and I probably would have said this at the meeting if I was. So it's not like I'm sitting here on some sort of ivory tower looking down and saying, this is what I would do, and that's what I would have actually said it. It's a fact that, you're introducing something without a financial plan, which is what we've just discussed. It's a lot easier to get across and say, well, this is going to cost you £20, but this is what you're going to get for your £20, which is a lot easier. So way back when, maybe, I don't know what year it was, you might be able to know, my own region put a proposition through to council that we got someone in to look at the structure of the RPRA.
2016, John.
The whole report.
And it was called the whole report, right? Yeah. And to me, they came in, they interviewed different members of staff, they did that, and I went to the meeting where we had the whole report representatives. They produced the report, and they came. And to me, obviously, not being a business-minded person at the time, I worked for the university, it had nothing to do. What they said made so much sense. It was unbelievable. You know, what they said was absolutely spot on, in my opinion. And we paid, I think it was £12,000 for it, or 11, whatever it cost. But the big key there was they wanted to separate the governance of the sport to the racing side. And that's exactly what we needed to do, because the way we are now, it's obviously the sport runs the governance doesn't run the sport. It's totally the wrong way around. And as Ian alluded, if you want to put the subs up, you've got to go to the members, and they don't vote on. They won't vote for an increase in subs. You know, I think it took maybe about 10 years to get it up from 6 to 10, something like that. You know, because people won't vote. But it's not the whole membership voting. It's just a small proportion of people who go to the region meetings. We had our AGM in February. I've got 127 clubs. So that means 127 people potentially can attend that meeting and vote. We got 21. So that's the proportion of people we got, was just under 20%.
And your region, John, is probably one of the best represented regions.
Yeah. We get a good turnout. But going back to the Hall report now, it was a direct, I wouldn't say it was an attack. It was a direct, honest opinion on the structure and what needed to be done. And I was a councillor, I was on the region, and what they said, we needed one representative from each region and not up to a maximum of 3. Now, I would have gladly stepped down and not been the region representation on council, because that's what needed to be done. But based on one councillor, who obviously we won't name, but one councillor said, I have been mandated by my region to have this thrown out in its entirety. And then the people who obviously were that way inclined then all voted for it. It didn't go back to the membership. The membership had voted to obviously put it in place, but the membership didn't vote to have it thrown out. Council threw it out, you know, and that is a direct criticism of this person, because he wasn't mandated, but he was one of the people that was opposed to the change in structure, because it would have directly affected him, not the membership. You know, and that's what we go back to again. There's a lot of people think looking after their own self-interest. Now, this whole report would have changed the sport. We wouldn't be sitting here now having this video call discussing the losses, because it was there to address it. It was to have an executive committee of small 4 people, and then it filtered down, and the sport was still run by the regions, but only the sporting elements. The other decisions were made. And obviously the big criticism, well, who's going to be the executive committee? And that was what it was, you know. And
right.
the easy solution, in my opinion, is that the membership decide who the executive committee is.
Mm-hmm.
You go out, you put your campaign in the British Home and World, say, I want to be on the executive committee because of blah blah blah. This is what I can bring. And then they vote, not councillors. The membership voted on who that executive committee should be. You know,
I think the whole report, in theory, that's still relevant now. Nothing's really changed since then. I mean, they have implemented some things, right? So they've implemented the Readings. They've modified the home in world, which I think personally is better than what it was before.
Can I just come in there a sec? I think the modification of the home and world was based on Ian's input and the executive committee's input when COVID. Because we were able to see things from a different angle, and we managed to put some things in place. You know, we went to second class posting, and then it got changed back to first class, and now obviously it's gone to second class, and people are saying, oh, well, we're saving the British home and world, blah, blah, gone to second. Well, no, because you lost them, because you went from second to first, and now you're going from first to second, so you haven't saved any money. You're just saving the money you wasted from going from second to first. Mm-hmm. So it's like trying to take praise for something that hasn't really happened, you know. And I think Ian's role in the RPRA was highly underrated. You know, Ian had a great vision. It just, unfortunately, it didn't tie in with the majority of council and I suppose a small minority of members as well. Because if you read some of the comments on social media, you know, about Ian, they're always positive. Well, most of them are.
Not all.
And that's in no way trying to downgrade any other previous CEO or obviously Chris Sutton now, because Chris is doing an extremely difficult job under extremely difficult circumstances now, and I don't think this is going to help.
No.
From the membership. You've just got to look at the comments on social media, and you know, okay, people can say social media is good, social media is bad, but it gives you a reflection of how people are feeling. Whether you don't say it's a bad comment or a good comment, it's just that's how people are feeling. So, you know, I just, from my perspective, I just don't think enough thought's been gone into it. And if we would have implemented the whole report at the point the time it did, I don't think we would have been as bad. But again, I certainly don't blame council at all, because they're in the position that they're in because the system is totally wrong. It's not the people, it's the system that's wrong, and change just can't be done overnight. You know, and a good example is if I put a letter into council and I missed the cut-off date for that letter, it doesn't get dealt with until October, which the season's over then. The pigeon racing season is over. So if you've got an issue and you miss off that cut-off date to get it into, yes, the president can, under his, obviously, how can we put it, his discretion, put it on the agenda. But if you miss it and it doesn't go on the agenda, it's far too long to be able to get anything sorted out. And again, that's no dig at any individual, that's a dig at the system, because the system is wrong.
So let's look at, we've got a short amount of time left. Considering where we are and what we know the feeling is about it, and you guys with your experience, how are we going to, or how is it going to be solved? What's going to happen in the next couple of years? What do you think? What do you think? If the two scenarios are a good one, and we don't want necessarily best and worst, but the two most realistic.
Can I just go first, Steve?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah.
Right. I personally, and I've said this openly on social media, you know, change in the RPRA via the members is easy. It's as simple as going to your club meeting, going to your region meeting and instructing your region councillor to go to council. They have to, by power of mandate, vote how the region wants you to vote. So if every single region wants change has to happen, because there's your majority vote. You know, if I put a proposition forward to say we want to resurrect the whole report and we want to implement what, you know, I go to my club, get it to the region, get it through to the region, and then it goes to council, right? The members only have to go to their club meeting and their delegate goes to the region meeting. And if enough people want change happens. That's how easy it is from my perspective. But people think it's some sort of secret society to get change, but it's not. The system's there for you. Go to your club, get your proposition, go to the region, and get enough people like-minded to get to that region meeting to have a majority to send it to council. And if every region does exactly the same, that's where your change comes in.
Yeah, and I think if change is to happen, that's the only way it is going to happen, because the people who are currently engaged in the regional system are not going to change it. So I think it's up to the members, rightly or wrongly, in terms of the processes and kind of input they're going to have to take to get it changed. John's spot on. You know, you need to discuss it at your club. If your club members are in agreement, get your delegate to the region meeting, or better still, write a letter first and then send your delegate into the region meeting. Get it on the agenda, discuss it, and if enough people are like-minded, your councillor or your regional representative has to vote how they're instructed, and that's basically it.
So that's what we're saying there is people have got to. I mean, that seems relatively straightforward. I mean, I wish I'd known about that. I mean, I, as a newcomer, you don't want to tread on people's toes. So I'm quite nervous about doing this in the first place, because I'm going to get some shit flinged at me. But I think, I mean, I have a bit of a rant here and there, but generally I'm a complete newcomer and I'm aware of that. I'm a novice, so I don't really want to be suggesting stuff. However, what I saw in the whole report makes sense, especially when it's read in the same day or in conjunction with these finances and the situation that we're in now. I think, judging by the mood of the people that I've not spoken to personally, because obviously we're not racing at the moment, but what I've seen on social media, people are peeved of the way it's been handled. But I think we're all in agreement. Yes, the subs have got to go up. They had to put them up. We'd all prefer the RPRA to be here. So, and we know that Chris Sutton and everyone, they've been put in a difficult position. I think this is my own opinion. Pay the 35 quid. Don't. Yes, you can be peeved about it, but sort of express that annoyance by taking that whole report to your club, like you've just suggested, and say this is what we want introducing, so that we don't visit this, or we don't come back to this situation again in another 12 months where we'll have even less money in the bank. We'll probably have even fewer members. And I mean, is that pretty much where we are? Does that make sense, or is that?
Yeah, I think a radical way of doing it, which obviously is not, and whether you include this on your on your video or not, that's entirely true. But obviously, council now set precedent of invoking Rule 142.
Yeah,
you could invoke Rule 142 and just implement the whole report.
Who would it take to invoke that?
They'd have to go through council, and that's where we found in the past that possibly it might not go. You need enough like-minded people to be able to want the whole report, to be able to do it from a council level. You know, obviously the membership can do it from that level, but if you really wanted to be radical and you wanted maybe council to just stand up and say, listen, this is what we're going to do. We're going to invoke Rule 142, just like they have done to increase the subs, because now they've shown they can do it under obviously some very difficult circumstances. Now, you could invoke Rule 142 for absolutely anything. That's why in some people's minds, it's a contentious rule, because that...
The only weakness there with that, John, is if they invoke Rule 142 to bring in your report, it only lasts a year.
Yeah, absolutely. But people then would see the value of how things are run, and then at the end of the year, you do a report to say we followed the whole report recommendations, and this is the improvement. And then when people see the improvement, they're more likely to obviously take it on board. But obviously, that is a radical way of doing it.
So, I mean, looking to do that, there's a lot of work involved in something like that to remove that burden, I guess, and that you're going to have to do a lot more things automated, and it's not just going to happen overnight, right?
Yeah.
But I was looking through some of the through the P&L, and I was looking at like software costs. It's like 1,300 quid.
Yeah.
Which tells me they don't have any software. Almost, there's nothing that would automate much. You'd expect that to be a person's salary to as much work. I mean, we've got God knows how much we spend on automated stuff, but it works seamlessly. And same with everything seems sort of plugs into each other now. One person does most of our bookkeeping, and there's transactions that come in from all over the world, and we have exchange rates, FX rates to try and reconcile. There's a lot of work, but it's all just clicking buttons because all the systems talk to each other. And if you've got somebody that knows how to make those systems work, that won't panic when there's a bug, then it takes out loads and loads of stress. And I think that would need to be implemented by somebody that wants it to succeed, not that it's been forced on them. I would probably, I mean, if I was any of these situations, I'd want the least amount of work possible, so I can just go and fly my birds and enjoy it. The least amount of stress possible. That's kind of what I like about racing pigeons.
Don't become RPRA CEO then, Dan.
Exactly. I mean, it's easy for me to sit here and say this is what I would do, and you guys aren't doing this right. And same with the people that are in power and in charge now. I think they've got a really hard job, and it is, I guess, it's my fault, and it's the people, the regular fancies that haven't turned up to these meetings and put these propositions forward.
You see, Dan, I don't necessarily agree with that, really. I see it as the fault of the people who have, in my opinion, the way I see it, blocked change. Those people who are engaged, because even when it's been spelt out to them and what this means to the RPRA and to the sport in general and its members, they've still not voted for it. And I don't think it's right to blame the people who are not engaged in the system, because some people have to drive 120-mile round trip to attend a region meeting on a Sunday afternoon, and I blame the people who've taken these decisions, and they're the people, the majority of people, not all the people, the majority of people who are involved in the regions. And I think they have to take responsibility.